Okay, all right. I think I'm recording. Oh, by the way, I've started recording these, and we used to tell people how to get to the recordings, and now what you have to do is go to YouTube and then type in the word M1BC or Agape. I'm not on. All right, go ahead. I am on. Tad loud. Anyone, what you do is go to YouTube and type in either Agape or M1BC, and then it'll pull up our files and you can just click on one wherever you are. So we're hopeful to get that rolling again now. Now, if I can get this mouse to cooperate. Okay, all right. Before we get started, I need to say something. Some people have trouble grasping that the whole Bible is tied together. But if you heard the sermon today, or will hear the sermon from Acts, the 5th book of the New Testament, and I'm teaching a lesson out of Numbers, which is the 4th book of the Old Testament, and the passages coincide so perfectly that that doesn't happen accidentally. So if you've ever struggled with, does the Old Testament relate to the New Testament? Just answer yes, it does. The title of the lesson in your quarterly is Rebellion and Judgment. And I thought maybe a subtitle perhaps would be better. Don't harden your heart. It's an Old Testament story, but it really has lots of spiritual truths. Old Testament story, but lots of spiritual truth. God's truth is always eternal, as is his glory, his grace, and his justice. All of those are going to be wrapped up in the story today. After I'd put the story to bed, in other words, I'd made my slides and all that sort of stuff, I woke up one night thinking, I just missed it altogether. So let me tell you what the thought was, and then we'll try to weave it back. Israel, who were enslaved in Egypt, were brought forth by the power of God. You remember the 10 plagues. They get to Red Sea and the water's flowing and they don't see a way out. Pharaoh's on the other side and God provides a way. They get a little further and they can't find any water and God provides water. They get a little further and they no more water and God throws a branch into the water and the water becomes palatable. That happens the 3rd time. Then they get to Mount Sinai and God audibly speaks. The mountain explodes with fire. The whole earth trembles. And they beg Moses, ask God not to speak that way. But you speak to you and you can tell us. Then after that, they go back and they come back and there are several other instances in which they have trouble. But the point I want to make is, of all the opportunities that they had to see God, they didn't see God. They saw the lot of result of God, but they didn't see God. So we're going to try to wave that back into our lesson. I put this in because I think it's important. In some crucial points of our lives, or in our nation's lives, there is a watershed moment, a moment in time that just affects everything. I called it a whiplash moment or a watershed moment, but it's really a learning moment. And we find the children of Israel on the border of going across the Jordan, and they decide that's not a good idea. So in this crucial, critical moment in time, it changes the whole course of Israel. So I gave you a little quick synopsis prior to this, but right before chapter 14 is chapter 13, which is good, right? Chapter 13 ends with the story of 10 spies or 12 spies being sent into Canaan, chosen by Moses and the people. And they come back with really a great report. The land is perfect for our needs. Good for farming, good for growing olive trees, all that sort of stuff. And then 10 spies, 10 of the 12 say, oh, but the people are too big for us. They got giants in the land and all that sort of stuff. Well, two of them stand up and speak. That's Caleb and Joshua. And they say, no, God's been with us this far. God will take us the rest of the way. The land is good. It's promised for us. Let's just give it. We get all of that prior to the lesson for today. And so I briefly outlined what you can see as we go through the first 24 verses and Numbers 14. Israel says no to going on to Canaan. I put these initials. That's Moses, Aaron, Caleb, and Joshua. They say, don't go back to Egypt. The crowd is set on stoning Moses, Aaron, Caleb, and Joshua. God intervenes, rejects Israel's attempt to go back. Moses prays for intercession. God honors Moses' plea, and God judges that generation. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we're going to quickly go through. So now we pick it up, the first 4 verses of Numbers 14.
They raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt, or in this desert. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt.
Now, you think about the reality, and we're going to try to explain that in just a minute, but what they're reacting is in a moment of crisis, they don't depend upon God. So they're here and they're trying to figure out what's the best course of action. Notice I underlined a couple of words right at the beginning. All of the people. Do you know what all means? How many people are on the ground? Maybe 2 million, at least 1 million, right? All of the people wept, raised their voices and wept and grumbled. I think I could explore that, but you probably know what that means. the sinners in the boat. You go to a PTA meeting and everybody says, no, we don't want to put a playground in the elementary school. And everybody on the other side said, the kids need it. And they say, no, it's too expensive. I've been there. Yeah. But really, although the names are listed as Moses and Aaron, what they're really complaining about is the Lord. And irrational thinking takes place. And they said, we'd have been better off in Egypt. Now, remember, they were slaves in Egypt. Now, I don't know how you count that we were better off in Egypt, but that's what they thought. That's the way irrational mind worked. And or maybe it'd been better if we died here and we wouldn't have had to make this decision. Irrational thoughts. Think about that just a minute. I pulled up a map, told me the distance from Egypt to Kadesh Barnea, where they are. The best guess, if you get a straight path, it's 450 to 500 miles. Now, if I had to make a choice of walking back across the desert of 450 miles, I'm not sure that's an appealing thing. And the thing they forgot was, how did they survive that? God provided manna, God provided water, God provided shade, the fire at night and the cloud of fire. Well, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, they say, let's change our leaders and go back to Egypt. Now, let me put a pause on that for a minute. You remember right after Moses is they start building the tabernacle, Moses goes up to get the 10 commandments. You remember how long he's on the mountain? 40 days, right? What happens down below? Moses is not going to come back, right? We don't know. Maybe a wild animal already killed him. Why are we waiting on Moses? And what did they do? You remember? The golden calf, and they started worshiping. They had orgies and all that sort of stuff. And that's really what's going on right here. Their past experiences, I said last week, their past experiences flow over to their current experiences. We got to watch that. Verses 5 through 9. I would like for you to just try to ignore the red letters for a moment. We're going to come over that in just a minute, but just if you're going to pick out anything, look at the underlined phrases.
Then Moses and Aaron fell face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there. Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will swallow them up. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them.
Right at the top, a couple of underlined phrases. Moses and Aaron did what? Fall face down. And they tore their clothes. Now, in the Old Testament, that was a sign of mourning. So they were totally upset at the way that the children of Israel acted. And they pleaded with them not to go back. And they said something that was said to them in Egypt. there's an underlined phrase. It says the land is flowing with milk and honey. That's a phrase that is always referring to the land of Canaan, the promised land. And so they've heard this phrase, and it's been said by both the spies and by Moses. And we hear that say that Moses and or Joshua and Caleb say, it's a land flowing with milk and honey. It's not bad. There's some challenges, but it is not bad. There's another phrase. If you remember when in chapter 13, right at the end, when the spies come back, they say there are giants in the land, they're walled cities, da 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 da. But then they say the land is going to swallow up everybody. And these were the negative reports. And so Aaron and Caleb say they're not going to swallow the land. It's such a beautiful play on what they'd heard before. But then he says something, and this is where the red letters come in. The Lord. And look at the number of times these pair of men refer to the Lord. It said the Lord, if the Lord is pleased with us, that's a whole different issue itself. Don't rebel against the Lord, but the Lord is with us. And so I summarized that and I said, the Lord will lead us and give it to us. The Lord is with us. Don't fear. They will not devour us. So here there's a choice made, kind of like in the voting box. You choose one candidate or the other candidate. And Joshua and Caleb said, choose this way. And everybody else says, choose the other way. But the pair of really heroic men don't express anything about the strength of Israel. You notice that? They don't say anything about, well, we've got hoes. Maybe we can fight the spears with hoes. We've got maybe a shovel. Maybe we can pick up rocks along the way. They don't say any of that stuff. They just say, God's going to take care of us. It's God's strength. There's a time, and actually happens pretty frequently, Brother Adam hit on this, that we hit that point where we have no reliance on anybody but God. And when we realize that we have to humble ourselves and pray, and remember it says, if the Lord is pleased with us, it's different. I think I'll come back to that in a minute. Well, let me say this. I think Caleb and Joshua, when they used that phrase, if the Lord is pleased with us, they're saying the only way that's going to happen if you have a change of heart. God's only been going to be with us if your heart is in alignment with his will. Now we go to verses 10 through 12.
But the Moses talked about soon. Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting to all the Israelites. The Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me, in spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they.
Before we get into breaking it down, let's just pause for a minute. Just put yourself in Israel's place. The whole assembly, my uncles and aunts, my grandparents, the whole assembly is talking about stoning Moses. Everybody seems to be in agreement. But then what happens? But God, my favorite phrase, but God. In that moment in time, God stops all that business. And he appears at the tent of the meeting. He appears. Now, I don't know what that means to you, but I know enough about Old Testament, the way it works, that when God showed himself strong at the tent of meetings or at the tabernacle, everybody could see that the glory of God had come down. It wasn't business as usual. Out of the middle of their camp comes a radiance, a power that gets everybody's attention. My mind says you can't read that without pausing and realizing, wow, what did I do wrong? And I think that's where they were. On the other hand, on one hand, they're talking about stoning their leaders. But in the next instant, God appears. And they don't talk about going back to Egypt anymore. Now, if we could see the reality of God as clearly as Israel did at that moment, we would change some of our directions quickly. Are you with me? It's just an overwhelming spirit that just appears. And God starts speaking. And the first two words he asks are a question. How long? How long? When we're struck in a pit and we're trying to pray our way out, we often say to God, how long is this going to go on? How long is this burning situation in my leg going to go on? How long am I going to have to limp? How long? But here, and take a note of this, it's God speaking. Now we know God knows all this, but he verbally says, how long? I don't know what that is, if it's not on your screen. And he asks three questions. How long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all I've done for them? How long will they treat me with contempt? Now that's a bit worse than ignoring. It's saying, I'm not only ignoring you, God, I'm not turning to you anymore. I've taken you off my bookshelf. You're not there anymore. And God says, I'm going to do something and I'm going to strike them down. And I'm going to replace them with Moses. Now, maybe you hear the word Moses and think of a human being, but let me tell you, I think it's bigger than that. I think it's with people of like faith of Moses. So it says, I'm going to replace the whole of Israel. And we're going to come back to this in a minute. But when they left the Red Sea, Moses did a census and there were 600 plus fighting men. So he's saying, I'm going to remove that 600 plus men and replace them by people of faith like you. We'll come back to it. It says greater and stronger. What does Moses do? Does he stand up and say, God, let's debate this issue? No. He just falls on his knees and he prays. His prayer is a beautiful example for us. The thing that I want you to catch is that Moses is not zealous for himself. Remember, God said, I can make you like a nation. Moses didn't pick up on that at all. In fact, he rejects the idea, but he goes back to God's character.
Moses said to the Lord, then the Egyptians will hear about it. By your power you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell the inhabitants of this land about it. They have already heard that you, O Lord, are with these people, and that you, O Lord, have been seen face to face, that your cloud stays over them, and that you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. If you put these people to death all at one time, the nations who have heard this report about you will say, the Lord was not able to bring these people into the land he promised them on oath, so he slaughtered them in the desert.
If you just take that passage and meditate on it for a little bit, what is the one argument he's making to God? Not God. What can you do? Not anything. Just God. Other people are going to hear that you don't have the power. I've toyed with that this week. I don't quite grab the significance, but Moses makes a point that is so crucial to this point in time. Moses said, God, other people are going to hear and they don't think you've got enough power to take them in. God, your reputation is at stake. Now, I could say that to you, right? I could say some things you're doing, you might not need to do. I could call your hand on it. But I couldn't say, because your neighbor hears about it. But that's what Moses does. He says, your reputation is at stake here. Realize that. Then that's part A of his supplications. Part B goes on. Verse 17 through 19.
Now the Lord's strength be displayed, just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love, and forgiving sin and rebellion. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generation. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sin of these people, just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now.
Look at that first line. Let your strength be displayed. I don't think he's talking about the strength of carrying them into Egypt. I don't think that at all. I think he's talking about the strength to withhold his wrath and give grace long enough for the lessons to be learned. Let your strength be displayed. You know, it's a beautiful picture of Christ's intercession for us. You know, he goes back into heaven and he prays, pleading our cause, and he says basically the same thing. They don't deserve your grace and your salvation, but my blood cleanses them. And Moses is saying, they don't deserve that. But your strength, your love can figure out a way to have that. I thought this was interesting. You can throw it out. I just thought it was interesting. Back when they had the golden calf incident, when Moses came back and he realizes that they're having a party instead of waiting on God. Remember, he throws the tablets down and breaks them. And he goes back up the mountain, if I got the story right, and he asks God to describe himself. And God says, I can't, or the Lord says, I can't let you see my face. So he puts him in a cleft of the rock where he can see just a shadow of God going past. And he says this, and he passed by in front of Moses, proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger. Now he lists three characteristics. But when Moses is speaking to God this time, he doesn't say compassion or grace. He goes to the third one, slow to anger. Now, maybe there's nothing in that, but I just simply say he passed over those two because that's what's happening. God is getting angry at his people. And Moses reminds him that his basic character is he's slow to anger. May his strength be displayed. I already hit this one a while ago. Just God's strength to control his wrath and give grace. God could be a God of all judgment. None of us would be part of it. But he withholds his wrath and put it onto Jesus so that our deserving wrath is taken care of by Jesus. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. God is God of justice as well. In reading that passage multiple times this week, I began to realize there was something unique going on. And that uniqueness is how close Moses and God were. Now, your best friends, I hope you got one, but your best friends, you can say anything you want to, and they'll excuse you. God and Moses have such a warm relationship here that Moses can say things that we think would be uncomfortable with God. But Moses is not worried about that. he realizes that his relationship, that he knows God better than the people knew God, and he's saying that. I love that intimacy word. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sins of these people, just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt. God, you've done it time and time again. You could have killed them all along the way, but you withheld your wrath. You held, sometimes a little judgment came on a group or another, but your great love, my plea is to forgive them sin. The word forgive denotes pardon, but in reality, it really signifies mercy. Forgiveness only occurs when mercy is worked. And he's saying to him, you guys are not on the same wavelength as I am, but I'm going to take children of Israel into Canaan. Verse 20 through 24, the last verses.
The Lord replied, I have forgiven them, as you asked. Nevertheless, as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of the men who saw my glory and the miraculous signs I performed in Egypt and in the desert, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their forefathers. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it. But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it.
I underlined one phrase. I didn't want us to lose it. God's glory. Notice the verse says in 21, nevertheless, as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth. There's a permanence about that. As long as the earth exists in its present form, God's glory is everywhere. You just need to look around. Take a deep breath and you'll see God's glory all around us. And he said that is not only beautiful for you to see, it's a permanence about that God will leave his glory here until he decides to move it out. I think that's powerful, that he's leaving his glory here. You ever wonder why God does things he does? Have you ever asked him? Have you ever gotten an answer? Most of the time, God does not answer why. Most of the time. Most of the time. But here, he does. That's one of the strengths of this passage in chapter 14. Here, God says, I'm going to tell you why I'm going to do these things. My mind just got blown away with that. He said, they saw my glory and the miraculous signs in Egypt, A, and B, they saw them in the desert, but they still disobeyed 10 times. I got tickled at the commentators. Some that say that's just a general term, but it means a lot. Others say there was exactly 10 times that they disobeyed. Whichever way you want to do it, doesn't really matter. It was a bunch of times that God had to forgive them already. But then he says, none of this generation will ever see the promised land. Now, I'll come back to that in just a minute. But isn't that pretty powerful? Remember, you got 600,000 fighting men plus everybody else. None of this generation. I don't know how long that generation is. What is it, 10 years, 20 years? I don't know what. None of this generation will ever see the promised land. But Caleb and Joshua both have a different spirit, and they'll inherit the land. So I'm making an application in the New Testament. Without faith, it's impossible to see God. Without faith, it's impossible to see God. Quick look at what this meant to Israel. By refusing God's plan, they would never enjoy the promised lands or see any more miracles. If you've read the Old Testament, you know that the battles that they fought were miracles after miracles after miracles. Not only the walls of Jericho coming down, but they had many miracles. They lost the privilege of seeing those future miracles. So then I got blown away. You remember numbers is numbers, right? They have numbers scattered throughout. So I went back and got the number of fighting men when they left Egypt. 603,550. After the 40 years in wilderness, they take another census. And there's 601,730 fighting men. Now, to my mind, that they ain't a whole lot of difference. So he wipes out, let me just say, probably 1 million people. I saw one commentator said, how many graves were there during that 40 years to die off 1 million people in 40 years? 6 or 7 funerals a day to get everybody killed. The other verse is going to wipe out those 10 spies quickly. But more than 1 million people, and then God bring the second generation to the same thing. My mind popped back to Job. Lost his 7 kids. At the end, he got 14 kids. He restored him. Naomi doesn't think she's ever going to have a grandchild, and she does. And he's in the line of Jesus. Couple of quick things. Now, again, remember, I think the whole issue is they failed to recognize Jesus as they walked along the way, or God is a better way. I don't think this lesson was about that we need to take home with us was anything to do with Israel. I think it has something to do with a warning for getting sidetracked. We can worship God, we can come to church, and we never see God sometimes. But here, I think we have a tendency to get sidetracked on the little issues instead of seeing Jesus. To me, it really wasn't to show how potent Moses' intercession was, but I think it reminds us the power of Jesus' intercession. Thirdly, I think the lesson should inspire us to have the same character, that we never waver in our commitment. What did God say, or Moses say about God? You're always gracious and compassionate slow to anger. The same, may we have the same firm characteristics at 42 as we do at 52 or 62. The same basic firmness in our spirit. And finally, I think the lesson should create within us a desire to be like Moses, who was so intimate with God that he could just talk. Father, thank you. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for the tying of your word from the Old Testament to the New Testament. Thank you for helping us see the depth of commitment of people like Moses, Aaron, and Caleb, and Joshua. Help us, Father, to be that kind of people. So now as we go this week, we ask you for safe travels wherever we go. We ask you for the future prospects of surgery. We ask you for all the things that you are on our hearts. Now go with us, Father. We'll praise you and we'll look for you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.